What is going on, everyone? It's SmartsJ8 here, bringing you guys a bit of a different video to start off the new year's. Star Wars Battlefront 2 sparked one of, if not the biggest controversies of 2017 in the gaming community. EA and DICE took the notion of taking microtransactions and loot boxes in their game, and then they decided to completely ignore the fine line in the sand that many gamers have drawn with how microtransactions should be handled, and they decided to say fuck that and throw it out the window. And what we ended up with was a system that had a gambling-like tactics that favored a pay-to-win mentality. While the system allowed players to earn loot boxes via gameplay, it also heavily incentivized players to take an easier route of purchasing the loot boxes, with each one giving players various star cards that can be equipped to give players different buffs in multiplayer matches. And these buffs could be ridiculous. They could range from something that are small and barely noticeable to something insane like a 40% health regen buff. And it all depended on the rarity of the cards. So what you essentially have is a system that rewards players by giving them access to various buffs that have direct effects on gameplay for putting money into a game, while at the same time punishing those who don't, or those who are going to get the game at a later time. And this ultimately created a massive outrage amongst the Star Wars community, and when the media, who was already in a frenzy over the hype for the release of the new Star Wars movie, Star Wars The Last Jedi, when they caught on to it, oh boy, did they act as an accelerant to the fire of that backlash. And what happened was that basically EA and DICE had their hand forced by Disney to remove the system for the time being due to the displeasure of all the bad press. And we also have now multiple states and some countries investigating whether loot boxes should be considered a form of gambling and whether there needs to be regulations on them, seeing as clearly EA kind of failed to regulate themselves here. I'm still seriously shocked at how far EA took their greed here. Like, I've never seen a company go this far before, and like I said before, I saw this being sort of a direction that companies might start slowly moving into the future, but I never thought they would just shove their way right through the damn door. What they did here was essentially completely ruin the competitive nature and progression of this game, where instead of having players, attempting to get better at the game in terms of skill levels, what we're seeing are players actually resorting to old school gaming tricks of rubber banding their controllers in order to grind out matches so they can earn credits to buy more loot boxes. You guys realize how long it's been since I've heard of rubber banding a controller in order to grind out a process? Like, it's been a long-ass time. I remember reading guides back in 2000 for Final Fantasy VII, and one of the big ones on earning experience is rubber banding your controller, your PlayStation 1 controller, in a marsh where an enemy respawns and comes at you and attacks you, and basically leaving it overnight so that you earned a shit ton of experience. Basically what it would do is it would catch you in this battle loop with this enemy. You'd kill it, it would respawn, come at you again, battle, kill it, respawn. And it would just earn you a ton of experience. So it's been a long time since I've heard of this tactic actually being used. And it's kind of funny. Or even worse, we're seeing players actually pray for the return of these microtransactions. And I usually categorize these type of people into two categories. One of them are the people that don't understand how the loot boxes EA and DICE tried to push through are any different than the loot boxes in, say, Overwatch or Call of Duty World War II, and who solely use the false equivalence of, well, every game has loot boxes argument. I also tend to throw the people in who say that players should be able to spend their money on what they want into this category as well, because while I do agree with this stance on a general term, I don't agree with it here because I don't think that they understand what they're advocating. They are advocating not only pay-to-win mechanics in a full-price AAA title, but also slot machine-like systems in a fucking kids game. Yeah, huge reminder out there to the people that are supporting EA's microtransaction system in this game. This was marketed towards young teens, kids, and young adults. And then you have the more cancerous of the two, the people that use it's a poor person's problem argument. The kind of scum that says if you can't afford it, then you should stop complaining and just go grind it out in the game. And these are the little Timmy fuckboys who try to say that they're only kids that are complaining about this because they don't have mommy's credit card, and that they should just go back and grind it out. Here's my issue with that. One, like I just said, at the core of this game, it is a kids game that had a heavily based pay-to-win microtransaction system that tries to lure in young teens with the hopes of getting the best star cards so they can feel like they're actually playing on an equal playing field with other players. That's not only wrong, that's disturbing. Two, me along with the vast majority of the community are not only not considered kids, we're considered full-grown adults making valid complaints, but we also have every right to make these complaints about this game. Okay, We know where this is going, and we know that this is screwing us over. Sure, they can say that it's funding free content in the future, but well, I've seen how quickly that can change, and we'll talk about that later in the video. Now, to some people, all of this would probably put Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the top of their most disappointing games of 2017 list without a second thought about it, especially with how Battlefront 1 went. You'd think that I would too, but surprisingly no. I would go as far as to say that this game is probably the most controversial game of 2017, but it is not my most disappointing game of 2017 for a couple of reasons. One, while the practices were incredibly shameful, I do have to respect the fact that EA and DICE were upfront about this. They stuck to their guns on it. While they were incredibly slimy tactics, the company didn't try to hide it from the public, so it wasn't only after players purchased a game that they realized just how bad the system was screwing them over. Two, DICE did try to make changes to it, and they ultimately did remove the system altogether, even for a short time. Sure, it was based largely on Disney's displeasure on the massive backlash that had arisen, especially with the new Star Wars movie right around the corner, but they still removed it, and there is the possibility that they can actually do good changes with it. Three, at its core, it's a good game. It's a good Star Wars game. I had fun with it. I enjoyed it. It took the original game and expanded on it in every way. It actually probably should have been the original game, but that's a different story. It gave us a good story that fills in some of the holes between Return of the Jedi, The Force Awakens, and even The Last Jedi. It gives us better ship controls, which actually take some time to really master and get a handle on, but at the same time are fun and enjoyable. And the multiplayer is fun. I enjoyed my time with it. That's not even including how amazing these worlds all look, or just the sheer amount of detail that went into this game that DICE is well known for. And finally, for the main reason number 4, when I got this game on Christmas, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into, what might happen in the future. The same cannot be said about the game that I do consider to be the most disappointing game of 2017. That game, since the day I got it on the midnight release, has been nothing but a headache and a personal insult to me and its player base, and that game is Destiny 2. And trust me, I don't say this lightly. I've supported Bungie all throughout Destiny 1, and it paid off. I know that they're capable and have the potential to make a great game, so hopefully this game eventually changes my mind. But for the time being, I am not happy with what Destiny 2 is turning out to be. And it hurts my heart, but I have to make this video. Because from all the memories that I have from Destiny 1, they're all getting tainted by this bullshit that they've been pulling in Destiny 2. Destiny 2 and Bungie has lied to me. They've lied to its player base. They made significant changes after the game's launch that affects gameplay without letting their players know. Even though they promised transparency, they greatly shifted their views on the Eververse system to make it and the microtransactions it supports much more significant than it was in the previous game. It's lacking severe replayability as they took away the option to revisit previous story missions. They took away dead ghosts for people like me that actually like to collect them and learn more about the game and its lore. The gun variants are absolute shit and are uninteresting. They create issues with players trying to pick out their own playstyles due to light levels and not being able to infuse one class of gun into another, even though they're in the same fucking kinetic special or heavy category. They locked off vanilla content from players, and the list just keeps going on, even up into the Curse of Osiris expansion, which has its own issues, along with it just being an uninteresting expansion with a small-ass patrol map, a short-ass anticlimactic story, and a raid with a boss that is literally a reskin of an oversized Vex Hydra. In all my years of gaming and all the games I've ever come across, I've never had a situation where I buy a game for a console that completely doesn't work the day it comes out. Now, I know there have been situations like that in the past. I've just been lucky to never come across that before. And in most cases, when I do come across a game where part of it doesn't work, it's usually just a multiplayer. And that's usually because of a server issue or something like that gets resolved within a day or so. That was not the case here. This entire fucking game did not work for me for almost 2 weeks because of bug issues that caused the game to constantly crash on PlayStation 4 Pros. In that time, all my friends hit their max light level. Bungie launched a new raid instead of pushing the launch date back in order to fix the crash issues that were making the game unplayable for people. My team went through the entire raid, and then at that point, their Destiny 2 experience was starting to wind down. Sure, they played it for the rest of the month and a couple of weeks into the next, but at that point, they were at what I call the grinding halt. It's a part of the game where new content basically ceases, and the only thing left to do is to grind out weapons and loot. Me, on the other hand, after the game finally started working, I got stuck trying to play catch-up the entire time, and at that point, I got tired of it. I felt like I had all this pressure dragging on my back to try and throw in as many hours into this game to get all the weapons and loot just so I could actually play with my fucking team. All because Bungie couldn't bother to bug test the PlayStation 4 Pros to place they say is the best experience for Destiny 2, and because they ran the raid out the door instead of working to fix the issues that made the game unplayable for people. And this is just a start. Let's jump into the shader system, one of the earliest issues of this game. Yeah, it sure was great to hear Bungie say that they were expanding the customization options for armors to allow players to put shaders on each individual armor piece. You know what wasn't great? The fact that they then turned around and fucked the player base over by saying, yeah, by turning the shaders into consumables instead of unlockables like they did in the previous game. Meaning players that acquired a shader in Destiny 2 could only use it one time and then it was gone. To make matters worse, they lacked a shit ton of the best shaders behind the Eververse system, which means if you want some of those badass shaders, you either need to grind out the bright engrams, which you earn after your character hits level 20, and pray to the RNGesus that you actually get what you want, or you need to pull out your money and start handing them some moolah. And the Eververse shit doesn't just end there. With the launch of the first expansion, Curse of Osiris, it was said that about 150 new items actually got locked behind the Eververse system. And then with the new Dawning event that's going on, the way that Bungie made it is that it's impossible for players to earn all the items a part of the Dawning event without actually paying for more of the special Dawning engrams. It pisses me off to no end, and this is the part where I said earlier in the video that we would talk about free updates in games and free content in games being funded by these kind of systems. It pisses me off to no end because they promised that the Eververse system was going to be a system to fund more free content and updates for the game. You can't call content free if you only give players access to some of it and then lock the majority of it behind a fucking paywall. The Eververse system at this point is no longer a system to help fund future updates and free events. It is now a system to fund events that gives some items for free to players, but then requires them to pay for the rest. At this point, I refuse to support it because it goes straight up against what it originally was put in the game for. And if Bungie continues down this road of making Eververse Store the cornerstone of the Destiny franchise, then it's only going to get worse from here. Next, we're not going to be just paying for special event gear. We're also going to be paying for shit like exclusive raid gear that can only be unlocked by buying a special token from the Eververse store, which then gives you a chance to unlock that gear. There might even be different levels of these tokens that increases your chance of unlocking the best gear by the level of the token. I can see them trying to do that down in the future, and I really fucking hope that they don't. I don't know, to me it's just a shame to see where Bungie was in Destiny 1 with the Eververse store and where they are now. It's almost like watching somebody who is battling addiction and just watching them getting consumed by it. Whereas in Destiny 1, they had these fun cosmetic emotes and stuff like that, cool weapon ornaments and stuff like that, and then you would be able to earn all of this stuff by engrams, and there's some items that were specific that you had to buy. But in Destiny 2, it's just like, let's take all the personalized items, all the personal cosmetic items, and just shove them down the throat of the Eververse store and say, fuck the players. I don't know. But let's move on. Then we get into a shit ton of controversies around the game. Within the first month, there was a major banning of players by Bungie without them giving any real significant reason to why, and without giving players any way of disputing the claim. Bungie then claimed that they worked vigorously to make sure they banned the right people, and it turned out while they did ban a ton of cheaters, they also banned quite a number of innocent players. And this all happened within the first month of the game's launch. Next, we get into the shady controversy around Destiny 2, as it was discovered earlier in December that Bungie was actually throttling experience gain with players who were grinding mission too quickly, while at the same time telling these players that they were earning the exact same amount of experience. These experience losses could go all the way up to 96%, with players only gaining 4% of the total amount of experience that was stated to have been earned. Soon there was a backlash that followed, and with many coming to the conclusion that this was Bungie's way of limiting the amount of bright engrams that players earned. Bungie themselves soon responded, saying that they agreed with players that they didn't like the system and were going to remove the throttling system and were going to be more transparent in the future. And then it was discovered that while they did remove the throttle, they also secretly increased the amount of experience needed to level up by double the original amount. And then we get into the Curse of Osiris expansion controversies, and right off the bat, let me just say that the Curse of Osiris expansion is a pretty lame one. Like, in terms of Destiny 1 expansions, I'd say that it's worse than House of Wolves, which was by far one of my least favorite expansions in D1. It is a boring narrative that adds nothing significant to an already gutted universe towards a character that has had all this lore built around him about how he rebelled against the city in the original game, only to have none of it pay off. This was a character that was considered a legend for how much unrest he stirred amongst the Guardians before he was exiled. Yet we end up with this character that barely ever shows up in the expansion, and at the end, when he does, he just comes to terms with Ikora and bids us a happy farewell like it's no big deal. At no point was there ever a moment where we really came across a moral dilemma where it leaves us with a better understanding of who Osiris is. The campaign's boss, though, his design is amazing. Like, it should have been used as the raid boss, because the raid boss, like I said before, is literally a reskin of an oversized Hydra. But the campaign boss is a complete joke. In terms of difficulty, he's a complete pushover. The new sector is completely uninteresting as well, especially after you've completed the largest public event in Destiny history and gone through the Infinite Forest a couple of times to fight the same enemies you've already fought time and time and time again. But no, the controversy really starts to kick off when players who didn't buy the expansion no longer had access to the prestige mode activities that increased its light level requirements, with the light level cap being raised from 300 to 330 with the expansion. Bungie, in their infinite wisdom, decided that instead of just making a new prestige mode for the higher light levels required, somewhat like they did with Destiny 1 Strike Team, that they would just lock it off altogether. There was also the Prometheus lens controversy and the whole Crucible laser tag shit, but that was actually pretty fun, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. Long story short, the lens was so broken it would literally melt Guardians in like a second, and it took Bungie a week to patch it. There is, unfortunately, not that many good things that I can say about Destiny 2 right now. Between my personal distaste for the game and all the controversies around the bullshit Bungie has tried to pull, I don't even know if they can really pull themselves out of this rut this time around. They did the first time, but it wasn't really until the Taken King came out. And I mean, do we really have to wait until the Taken Queen expansion comes out before this game actually gets good? I'm calling it the Taken Queen expansion as speculation of Savathun's arrival. I know that she is coming just based off of how Bungie does these kinds of things. Hell, she might even be why we're going up against the War Minds in the next expansion, seeing as she is one of the Hive Gods who forever seeks knowledge in her garage with Lamborghinis. But until that time comes, this game is not fun for me to play. I'll keep playing through the expansions, but at this point, I don't care about getting max light level anymore. I don't care about going through the raids. I'll do it if my team needs me, but for the most part, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care about earning all the best loot, especially if Bungie decides to make another game that forces us all to get rid of it. And I don't care about going through the Crucible anymore because I can't stand the fact that it's only 4v4. Not only does that limit the amount of people that I can play with, but it also limits the amount of fun that I can have with the Crucible. Before, 6v6 made it more of a casual and relaxed experience. Now it's just a constant intensity with a pressure to do the best you can following throughout the entire match. Take that with the fact that you barely ever get your supers and it takes forever for you to get your grenades back. And that's just ultimately why this game is such a disappointment to me. There is just so little for me to actually get invested into, and I just end up going and playing another game. Like for Destiny 1, it was always the dead ghost and how deep the lore went that kept me coming back for more. That's basically what got me into the race and collecting exotics so I could get more of those lore cards and learn more. That's basically been gutted from this game, and what we end up with is a subpar story, a lore that, while at times can be good, it mostly ignores crucial elements and plot points of the first game. It strips away locations like the Moon, Mars, Venus, and the Reef, and it gives us a bunch of boring-ass characters. At no point did I ever really feel like this was a direct sequel to Destiny 1. Sure, there were some callbacks, but they were very few and far between, and they were nothing significant. Like, you can forget about the Darkness and the Stranger because Bungie sure as hell did. We also never find out what happens to the Moon. Did we retake it now that Crota is dead, or is it still infected with the Hive or the Fallen? I don't know. They never say. What happened to Oryx's ship? Is it still floating there, silent and dead, or has it become a new nesting ground for the Hive? What about Eris Morn? Where the fuck is she? What about the Reef, the Prison of Elders, the fucking Queen, the Prince, Varix? Bungie, do you not know how to have a consistency with plot elements of a fucking story? It's like reading a story that was written by someone with severe ADHD and forgetting the plot elements and subplots of the first story. I get the city coming under attack is a major issue, and that is probably the top priority for the Guardians, but imagine if there were side missions that unlocked after we reclaim the city, And these missions took us back to the places in D1, and it gave us insight to the changes that occurred there since the events of D1, and also allows us to see the further changes that might take place now that, spoiler alert, the Traveler has woken from his lovely nap. There's also no fucking reason why we can't have strikes that take place on the Moon, Venus, Mars, or even the Dreadnought. Where the fuck are those? To be completely honest with you guys, it's sad to me to see that this is where Destiny 2 is going. And I really hope that with the next expansion, we actually see Bungie listening to the feedback of the community and start making changes to the games and not releasing constant apology letters because they tried to fuck us over once more. And we caught them. We caught you, Bungie. Sorry, guys, we fucked up. We won't do it again. Fucking idiots. But like always, these are just my opinions on the matter. I will admit I do have a bit of a biased outlook on this game just based off how the launch week went for me and how hard I tried to get this shit to work. But at the end of the day, I do think that it's important to remind people that these are just opinions on how I feel about the game and that you are completely free to agree or disagree with them. Your opinions may be very different from mine. You may have had a blast with this game. Your experience with this game might have been equivalent to my experience with Destiny 1, and I would love to hear why. Or you might have completely disagreed with my stance on Star Wars Battlefront 2 and think that that game is the most disappointing and disgusting game of 2017. Which, again, I would love to hear why in the comments below. But I want to thank you all for joining me this. Thank you all for a wonderful 2017 as we move into 2018. Of course, the schedule will soon kick off again, and I'm hoping for another great year. More fucking content for you guys. I want to release another video that's something like this, my favorite games of 2017. I don't know if I'm going to do albums. I will if you guys want it. But yeah, thank you guys for an awesome 2017, and hopefully 2018 brings even more awesome content for you. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one. Mars out.